My name is Don Jorgensen. Welcome to our discussions on issues and candidates. With me today in the studio is Mr. Joe Plaia. He is candidate for the Rockingham County Attorney's Office. Joe, welcome and thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me, Don.
Before we discuss your credentials, which obviously this is going to be part of,
Sure.
Let's talk briefly about the job of a county attorney. I think some people have a sense of it, but probably don't have any real knowledge of what it's about.
Right.
Could you summarize the responsibilities of the position? And from your perspective, which of those responsibilities have the highest priorities?
Sure. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't know what the county attorney is in New Hampshire because they're used to a different term. They're used to the term district attorney. But in New Hampshire, the districts are broken up by county, so your county attorney is basically your district attorney, which is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, responsible for prosecuting or overseeing the prosecution of the felony cases that occur in the county. I think the daily responsibilities of the job include, or should include, prosecuting cases, overseeing what's going on in the courtroom by your assistant county attorneys, so managing employees. Also, you have to maintain a budget and plan accordingly in that sense. So there's administrative responsibilities, meeting with and keeping strong relationships with your police departments, not just the chiefs, but the officers, in my mind, that are out there doing the job every day on the ground. And also, maintaining a rapport and working with your county delegation and your county commissioners in order to make sure that the office of the county attorney runs effectively. The highest priorities for the county attorney should be, one, keeping Rockingham County safe. Two, I would say utilize effective alternative sentencing programs that save money and reduce crime at the same time. And three, because of what's happened in our county attorney's office over the past several years, is restoring professionalism, respect, leadership, and dignity back to that office.
Interesting, very interesting. Obviously, to do this job properly, it requires not only an in-depth knowledge of the law, but it also clearly requires an understanding of what to expect from people from all walks of life, not just one group and not just policemen alone.
Sure.
Joe, could you take a few minutes to share with us the experiences you bring to the table, and which of those experiences and qualifications, if any, you consider the most beneficial to make you, let's say, uniquely qualified for this position?
Sure. Well, I consider myself a criminal justice professional. I think the people that I'm up against are just career prosecutors. That's all they've done in the system. I started my career as a military police officer in the Marine Corps. So I've gone through a police academy, and I've done the job that our police officers do every day. And in my mind, being chief law enforcement officer of the county, I think that's an important thing to bring to the table. Secondly, I've also studied criminal justice through a master's program and focused on criminal law in law school. But in my legal career after law school, I've been a public defender in Rockingham County. I've been a state police prosecutor in both Rockingham and Stratford counties. And finally, the most recent experience is I'm also the chief hearings officer for the New Hampshire Liquor Commission. So that's just a term that the title is called, but it's an administrative judge. So what I do now is any licensees, liquor licensees that violate the liquor laws, if they want a hearing, they actually come in front of me and I judge those cases, I adjudicate those. So my criminal justice experience and criminal experience is varied in the fact that I've pretty much worn every hat you can wear in that system. But finally, the most unique thing is I have the leadership and management experience that none of the other candidates have to deal with this. I've actually dealt with a situation that's similar to kind of what's happened with the Rockingham County Attorney's Office. The county attorney resigned and has basically kind of forced resignation, removed from office. and we've had a leadership problem up there. Well, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a non-commissioned officer. There was a platoon of military police that all the leadership was in that platoon was court-martialed. And I was brought in along with a staff sergeant, and a sergeant, and another corporal, and the two of us corporals were made squad leaders. So I was in charge of 13 Marines. Some of them were in that platoon when the leadership had been removed, and some of them came in directly from the police academy or transferred from other platoons. So I've actually been through the experience of managing Marines who were in a situation similar to this, where their platoon, not office, was completely disgraced and just lost all their leadership.
Leaving a big hole, I would assume, in making things effectively function.
Yes.
Can we talk just briefly before we go further on your experience in the Marines?
Mm-hmm.
You were in training as for the military police.
Yes.
Could you just kind of briefly summarize what that included? And I'm kind of adding that because some people don't realize there is a correlation between what goes on in the civilian world and the police world and in the Marine police or the military police as well.
Absolutely. The training included responding to and dealing with domestic violence calls. It dealt with self-defense, obviously, and dealing with hostile individuals. Drug training, drug detection, investigation, interviewing witnesses, DWIs. I was certified on the breathalyzer and certified in radar. So traffic stops to domestic violence calls to fights to thefts. I was involved in investigating and making arrests in all those kind of cases.
Interesting, very interesting. I would like to shift the discussion a bit to the practices of the Rockingham County Attorney's Office specifically over the past few years, and to determine, or to at least to get some insight into what you perceive as the problems that it's created for the county. But first, who was the most recent elected county attorney, and why is he not running again? You alluded to it a couple moments ago, but perhaps you can fill in a few of the blanks.
Sure. The last county attorney was Jim Reams. He was in office, have to run every 2 years. He was in office since, I think his first election he won was 1998. And so he took office in 98 or January of 1999. And the reason he's not running again is because last November, an investigation started because of complaints of sexual harassment. The Attorney General was involved, and the United States Attorney was involved in investigating, and they interviewed employees past and present, and they wound up finding issues with finances and money, which I just won't get into all the details of that because we'd be talking about it for a long time.
Sure.
So the county reached a settlement with Attorney Reams, and he resigned from office. And so now the Attorney General offered the county to have an Assistant Attorney General be the interim county attorney, and that's Jim Buffetti, and he's been doing that since Attorney Reams left. And he's offered his support to all the candidates in the case to stay on for a while and help them in the transition. And so that's basically what had happened. And so you asked about the practices of the county attorney's office, and beyond that obvious practice with
Sure.
a failed leadership, it's really just been behind the times with modern criminal justice practice. I mean, there's many, many, many programs that are used in Stratford County and Merrimack County and all over the country that save counties millions and millions of dollars a year in incarceration costs. And they also reduce crime by reducing recidivism rates. In other words, repeat offenders aren't repeating anymore because they're getting the rehabilitation or treatment needed to not reoffend. And we just don't do that in Rockingham County. We don't effectively utilize the drug court that's in place, or the diversion program, the county diversion program that's in place. 2 years ago when I ran there were 54 people in the diversion, 54 people in the drug court program actually in Stratford, while there was, I think, 7 in Rockingham's, and then there was only 1 referral that year from the Rockingham County Attorney's Office to the diversion program. So these practices of refusing to grow with these programs and utilize them has really cost the county a lot of money and cost the county jail to be at maximum capacity, and really has just also, in my mind, taken the county attorney's office. They're focusing on these nonviolent drug offense crimes where they should be focusing on the violent offenders and putting more attention towards that, towards the serious felonies.
Well, and that makes substantial sense. And that really kind of goes into the next question, because it relates to some of the points that you just made. But there are established programs and practices that would improve effectiveness of the county attorney.
Yes.
That are not currently being used, as you've addressed, that you've addressed, such as diversion and drug court, et cetera, et cetera. Could you describe a little more what they do for the voter here, so they have a sense of what we're dealing with?
Sure. Well, there are several programs out there that other counties use. Diversion, for example, is a program in which you get a young, first-time offender who maybe had possession of his friend's prescription Adderall on him, and during a traffic stop was found in possession of it. That young offender is now charged with a felony. What the diversion program does is, first of all, the offender has to pay for it, and the cost is about the same amount as a fine for possession of drugs would be in court. Secondly, it's usually like a 6-month program. They have to do community service. They have to go through drug and alcohol classes and education training. They have to go through random drug tests to ensure they're not using. And really, it holds them accountable for the crime, but at the same time, it educates them and rehabilitates them if they do have a drug issue. And they'll determine, the great thing is that the people that run these programs, the one that runs Merrimack's, for instance, is a former chief of police. And these aren't partisan programs. He's a Republican. And I've sat and I've met with him and talked to him. He talks about the success rate of his program. And the success rate over there is 85%. In other words, only 15% of the people are reoffending.
Sure.
The normal recidivism rate's between 50 and 60%, nationally and in New Hampshire. So the effectiveness of the program is obviously much better. And also, what it does is the charge is placed on file without a finding, and then if he or she graduates the program, the charge is dropped. This person can then go to college and still receive financial aid. If they had a drug conviction on their record, they wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
Other programs like drug court will handle people with more serious addiction problems, but over a 5-year longitudinal study in Stratford County, they've determined that their success rate is 90%. So only 10% of people have reoffended over a 5-year study, which is amazing when you compare the two. And again, these are people that would normally be spending time in the Rockingham County Jail at over $100 a day, which because of our max capacity at our jail, we're spending $1.1 million a year giving it over to Hillsborough County to house our overflow of offenders, which are all our women. So we don't have any women in the Rockingham County Jail. They're all over in the Hillsborough County Jail. Other programs include Veterans Track program to help veterans coming back with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. Early case resolution they use in Stratford County is something where 2 senior attorneys, a senior public defender and a senior assistant county attorney, meet once a week to discuss the cases that are coming to be indicted. They actually resolve 40% of their caseload that way right there, just in these meetings that they have, because they know the value of the case, they know what they're worth, they know what the sentence should be, they know if it should be diversion or drug court, state prison, jail, and the attorneys make the recommendations to the clients, and the client is either on board with it or he's not. Same thing with the victim of a crime. They're either on board with it or not. So victim input is also taken into consideration. But again, 40% of the caseload, just like that, we could
Goes
really,
away.
yeah, exactly. And they're done and pled out usually within, I think, 30 to 45 days.
And with only what, you said a 10% recidivism rate?
Oh no, this is an alternative sentencing. Well,
Okay.
It's aimed at efficiency.
Okay.
It's efficient prosecution, and so it saves time. The normal case might be in Superior Court for a year. This saves you from having the grand jury have to go through into the indictment process, and saves several court appearances, and ultimately trial as well. So, like I said, some of these people could still go to state prison. Some of them could go to county jail. Some of them might get drug court or diversion, whatever the case may be. But the point is, instead of wasting a year's time, the two attorneys sit across the table once a week and just go through these files and decide what's going to happen with the case, with victim input and defendant input.
So much more efficient,
Yes.
much faster,
Yep.
and ultimately a lot less expensive.
Exactly.
Interesting. What about could you talk just briefly about the community corrections centers? What do they drive?
Yeah. Basically, a community corrections center might be the place where you house a lot of these programs. They might be places where people are going through diversion or drug court where they're meeting, but drug court is actually, most of the meetings are done at court. But for instance, there are transitional programs too. It's not just a community correction center, but I like to talk about the therapeutic community program that they use in Stratford County. It's a case where somebody gets sentenced to jail. They have an option to sign up to get into the therapeutic community program. If they get accepted into that, then they're receiving treatment, whether it be for drugs or alcohol, whatever their issue is, life counseling, learning how to do a resume, learning how to get a job, social situations, whatever the case may be. They're always catered toward what the individual needs. If the person successfully completes the program, then they start to transition out of jail early. So then they might take the next step and get put on the bracelet and be on electronic monitoring for the rest of their sentence. And then, they're out into the community. And that's basically what community corrections is it doesn't necessarily mean that there's one center where there's one place that houses all these programs. Community corrections is the idea of we're gonna still hold these people accountable, but it's not just in the county jail. We're holding them accountable while they're in the community.
So essentially ruling in something that's far more flexible, but again, dealing with it in terms of greater efficacy and reducing cost.
Reducing costs, and usually the programs are very successful. They also reduce crime because people aren't recommitting offenses, and they're becoming tax-paying, contributing members of society.
Which is desperately what we need.
Yes.
Well, what I'm hearing here, I guess, is that that effective law enforcement comes at a cost, but you're making it pretty clear to me that that we can do a lot more to control those costs without reducing effectiveness. In short, we can have better law enforcement at the same cost or even less.
Definitely. I mean, Stratford County, when I met with all these people that ran all these programs over Merrimack, Belknap, and Stratford County 2 years ago, they gave me some of their numbers. And for instance, I think at the time Stratford County was spending about just under $2 million a year total for these programs. And their estimation was that they saved over $11 million a year in incarceration costs alone. And that doesn't even count the court costs and some of the other things, legal fees, all that. It was just in incarceration costs that they saved over $11 million by spending less than $2 million.
Boy, what we couldn't do with our schools and our roads, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe we wouldn't have had to close the senior center
Exactly.
over the past year.
Sure. Can we talk also briefly about addressing nonviolent offenders, such as you already discussed veterans assistance, but also mental illness, domestic abuse? Because as I understand it, and I don't know the specifics nor the statistics, but I had heard that there's a huge percentage of people end up in jail have mental illness problems.
Yeah, there are, and veterans in particular. I mean, right now, 11% of our state prison population are war veterans, which to me is unacceptable. We just have to find a way to help them. And again, this isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. This is addressing the fact that their crimes are being committed based on an injury that they received while fighting a war for us. So there should be something in place to help them out. You know, there was a Marine that I helped out a couple of years ago who came back from Iraq with post-traumatic stress disorder and a traumatic brain injury. And the county attorney's office in Rockingham was unwilling to work anything out. They charged him with felony DWI because the statute says you can actually be charged with a felony when you cause serious bodily injury to yourself. He broke his back in an accident in a commission of DWI. So there were no other victims in the case, but they were insistent that he get this felony.
Virtually double jeopardy, but okay.
So we got the Wounded Warrior Regiment involved, and this major came down, and he was great, and we got him hooked up with the VA. He started going to counseling regularly, and we got him into a clinic, an inpatient clinic in upstate New York for people with traumatic brain injuries. And we sat down with Jim Reams at the time, and we did wind up convincing Jim Reams that by showing him that the alcoholism that he was going through was a direct correlation to the injury he received, and that we had this treatment center lined up. Attorney Reams eventually agreed to reduce the charge to a misdemeanor. But again, this took 9 months. Portsmouth Police Department was ready to reduce it right away if he went to this clinic. So those are the kind of things that we need to be doing for our veterans. But there are also mental health courts, not just drug courts, and it's a direct correlation. If you have an addiction, almost every time it's because you have an underlying mental illness.
Sure.
And these things have to be treated, and we can't jail our way out of this problem.
And it comes to something related to more efficiency, less cost, but also more humanity. It's giving people an opportunity to get better.
It is, and you know, and then it's not going to work every time. There is, like I said, in all these cases, 15% of it of the time it's not working. So if the people don't want to get better, if they don't want the help, okay, we're going to have to do something if they keep committing crimes.
And that we can.
And we'll have to. But
Sure.
you know, the first 1 or 2 times around, let's see if, you know, there's always going to be relapse.
Sure.
As well. So you have to be understanding about that, and that's what drug court does. They don't just kick you out of the program because you relapsed the first time. You might have to go spend 2 or 3 days in jail or whatever, or in counseling or classes or whatever else punishment fits the crime, but then you're back in the program and going at it. Eventually you can fail out, but for those who graduate, again, 85% of them in Stratford County, 90% of them aren't reoffending.
Wow.
So, and the biggest thing is with this efficacy we're talking about, you can then take the focus and spend your time in the courtroom really paying attention to the serious violent offenders and making sure that they are going into state prison and our counties kept safe. And that is important to me. I think
to all of us, I think.
There needs to be a serious felony offender unit in there with prosecutors focusing on those cases. There needs to be a drug unit in there with prosecutors focusing on those cases. We need to go after the dealers, not the users. The users need drug court and diversion. The dealers need to be going to prison.
Sure, of course. To move to a somewhat tangential issue on this, but it still relates to the same thing. What would you advise voters to focus on to make a more informed decision as to the best candidate for the job, or to say it another way, what should voters look at within the resumes of the candidates running for office that could limit their effectiveness?
Sure. Well, the first thing I urge voters to understand is that the position of county attorney is one of the few that you'd vote for that's really not partisan at all. These aren't Republican or Democrat issues that we're dealing with. These are just societal issues. This is crime. And whoever has the best resume to deal with crime should be the county attorney. I urge them to look at the fact that The only one other candidate that has any management experience to the extent that I've had or leadership experience is currently a leader in the county attorney's office where everything fell apart. She got her leadership experience through Jim Reams, who was forced to resign. So I urge them to look at that. The others have never led in a way that I've had to lead. I've had management experience in the Marines. I'm a member of 2 boards of directors, so I deal with budgeting and personnel issues as well. So I have the administrative experience as well as the legal background to deal with this. And I'm the only one who wasn't just a prosecutor. I'm the one that has actually been a law enforcement officer, has done criminal defense work, has prosecuted cases, and adjudicates cases as an administrative judge for the Liquor Commission. I think that balanced background that I have brings the mindset you want to the county attorney's office to realize it's not just about convictions, it's justice. Your job as a prosecutor is to seek justice in every case, not just get a conviction because you can.
In other words, you have to see both sides.
You do have to see both sides.
And perhaps some of the other candidates not so well positioned to do that.
That would be my experience with some of the other candidates, yes.
Gotcha. Well, I really appreciate the time and what we've covered. We're almost out of time now, but since the issues we discussed were somewhat limited, are there other comments you would like to make at this point? And as they say, the camera is yours.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'd just like to reiterate that I think that there's 3 important reasons why I'm running. And one is because I want to keep Rockingham County safe. 2, it's because I want to utilize the programs that save the taxpayers of this county money while reducing crime at the same time. And 3, I do want to bring leadership and respect and dignity back to the county attorney's office. I think I'm the best candidate for that because, 1, I have the most varied and balanced background. 2, I'm the only one that has law enforcement experience. And 3, because I'm the only one that has the leadership and administrative experience to bring to that office as well. I think it's very important for voters to get the word out on this race. Not a lot of people pay attention to it. So the way you can help me is to tell your neighbors, to tell your friends, and to go to my website, which is Joe Plaia for countyattorney.com. I need contributions. I need that to be shared. I also need the Facebook page to be shared and like, which is Joe Plaia 2014, and Twitter, whatever else. But that's how voters can help, and the word does need to be spread. So I appreciate any consideration that you give me, and thanks for your time, and thanks for having me here today.
Joe, thank you for joining us and giving the citizens of our town the opportunity to hear what you have to say. I also thank the audience for listening to us, and good afternoon.